I stared at the calendar on my kitchen wall, the date circled in red ink for 40 years of planning. May 15th. My stomach nodded as I heard the front door open. Richard would remember this year. He had to. My name is Dorleen Parker, and I am about to share my story of pure betrayal and revenge. Do well to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications for more thrilling revenge stories. I smoothed my new dress, navy blue with a modest neckline, bought on sale but still more than I usually spend on myself. 40 years. Ruby anniversary. The weight of 4 decades hung in the air of our sprawling colonial as Richard's footsteps crossed the marble foyer. "Something smells good," he called out, his voice carrying the same confident tone that had first attracted me at 25. His hair had grayed at the temples, but at 67, Richard Parker still commanded rooms with his presence, still turned heads at country club gatherings. "Special dinner," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "For a special day." Richard entered the kitchen, loosening his tie. His eyes registered the candles, the good china, my dress, before his brow furrowed. Did I miss something? "Is the Peterson deal dinner tonight?" The knife in my chest twisted. "No," I said quietly. "Today's May 15th. Richard's expression remained blank. "Our anniversary," I added. 40 years today. Recognition flickered, then vanished behind annoyance. Christ, Dorleen. I've got the Singapore portfolio review in the morning. This is hardly the time for. He waved his hand dismissively. For what? Celebrating 4 decades of marriage. The words escaped before I could trap them behind my usual accommodating smile. Richard sighed, the sound he reserved for particularly difficult clients. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but we're a bit old for this sentimental nonsense, don't you think? 40 years is just a number." I placed the serving spoon down carefully. "Just a number," I repeated. "Exactly." He reached for his phone, already scrolling through emails. "I need to review these projections before tomorrow. Can you put mine in the microwave? I'll eat later." Something crystallized in me in that moment, something hard and sharp. "You really don't think today is worth celebrating?" I asked, my voice strangely calm. "Honestly?" Richard didn't look up from his phone. "At our age, what's there to celebrate? We've built a life. It is what it is." He finally glanced at me, his expression softening marginally at whatever he saw in my face. "Don't take it personally. You knew what you were signing up for when you married me." "Did I?" "Of course. I built all this." He gestured around at our kitchen with its Viking range and marble countertops, while you had the luxury of staying home. Most women would be grateful. The word grateful hung between us like a poisoned apple. "All these years," I whispered, "I thought we were building something together." Richard's laugh carried no humor. "Together? Dorleen, let's be honest. I've carried the financial burden of this marriage since day one. Your contribution was domestic." "Burden," I repeated, the words settling into my bones. "Figure of speech," he said dismissively. "Look, I don't have time for one of your emotional episodes. I need to prepare for tomorrow." He left me standing there, surrounded by cooling food and flickering candles. I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed somewhere in the previous decade. Instead, I reached for my phone and pulled up a contact I'd saved 3 months earlier, when I'd first noticed Richard's increasing contempt. When the divorce attorney answered, I spoke with unexpected clarity. "It's Dorleen Parker. I'm ready for that consultation." The next morning, while Richard flew to Singapore, I visited First National Bank. My hands no longer trembled as I accessed our safe deposit box, removing the documents I needed. The bank manager's eyebrows rose slightly when I explained what I needed, but he nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mrs. Parker. Your name is on all these accounts as well. You have every right." That afternoon, I called Margaret Wheatley, a financial advisor Richard had dismissed as too aggressive years ago when we'd met at a charity function. "I remember you," Margaret said. "Richard Parker's wife." "Just Dorleen," I corrected. "And I need your help." 3 days later, as Richard negotiated deals in Singapore, I sat across from Margaret in a sleek downtown office. "You've been married 40 years, Margaret said, reviewing the financial documents I had brought. "And in all that time, I never questioned anything," I finished. "He handled the money. I handled the home." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, it seems like Mr. Parker has been busy." She turned her computer screen so I could see it. "These offshore accounts. The secondary investment portfolio. Did you know about these?" I stared at numbers with too many zeros. "No. You're listed as co-owner, but the statements go to a P.O. box." Margaret's eyes were sharp. "Mrs. Parker, Dorleen, your husband has been hiding assets. Significant ones." Something cold and calculating awakened in me, something I hadn't known existed. "Show me everything," I said. By the time Richard returned from Singapore, I had met with a divorce attorney 3 times, consulted with a forensic accountant, and made an offer on a small commercial property in Saratoga that the accountant had identified as severely undervalued. "You seem different," Richard commented over breakfast, barely looking up from his Wall Street Journal. I poured his coffee exactly how he liked it. "Do I?" He replied, already distracted. I smiled as I turned away. For 40 years, I had been invisible. Now it would become my superpower. The for sale sign appeared in our front yard on a Tuesday. Richard was in Chicago for a 3-day conference when the real estate agent pounded it into our manicured lawn. By Wednesday evening, I had accepted an all-cash offer well above asking price. "Are you sure Mr. Parker's on board?" the agent had asked. I smiled, producing the power of attorney document Richard had signed years ago, never imagining I'd use it. He trusts my judgment implicitly. The family lawyer had been more difficult. "Dorleen, this is highly irregular. Richard has always handled these matters." "And now I am," I replied calmly. "Unless there's some legal reason I can't sell property I co-own." There wasn't, and he knew it. When the proceeds from the house sale hit our joint account, the one Richard rarely monitored because it was for household expenses, I transferred exactly half to my new private account. Legal, clean, and by the book. I was packing the last of my personal items when Richard called from a Chicago hotel. "The Peterson deal is done," he announced without preamble. "We should celebrate when I get back. That steakhouse you don't like." "That sounds nice," I said, sealing a box of photo albums. "How's the Langham?" "Pretentious as always," he snorted. "Everything okay there?" I looked around at the half-empty house. Everything's exactly as it should be. I was gone before he returned, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter with my attorney's contact information. The house keys I left with the new owner's real estate agent, along with a bottle of champagne and congratulations. My new apartment was 1/5 the size of our colonial. Located in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a city Richard had always dismissed as quaint but provincial, it overlooked the harbor. I'd paid 6 months' rent in advance and furnished it sparsely from a high-end consignment shop. Richard's first call came at 9:17 p.m. on Friday, 43 minutes after his expected arrival home. I let it go to voicemail. His message was predictably Richard, confusion, followed by irritation, concluding with commanding me to explain yourself immediately. The second call came 12 minutes later. Then the third. By midnight, he'd left 7 increasingly agitated messages and 14 texts. At 8 a.m. Saturday, I answered his call. "Have you lost your mind?" Richard demanded without greeting. "The house is sold? Some strangers have our keys? What the hell is going on?" "I decided to make a change," I said calmly. I've transferred your half of the proceeds to our joint account. My attorney will be in touch about the rest. The rest? Dorleen, you can't just. I can, and I did. 40 years, Richard. 40 years you've made every decision, controlled every dollar, dismissed every idea I had. You called me a burden. Well, now I'm unburdening you. His stunned silence gave me a satisfaction I'd never known. This is ridiculous, he finally spluttered. You're acting emotionally. Where are you? We need to talk sense into you. No, we don't, I replied. For the first time in decades, I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Before he could respond, I added, I've left everything you'll need with Gerald, our family attorney. Don't call me again, Richard. My lawyer will handle all communication going forward. I ended the call and blocked his number. That afternoon, I met with Margaret Wheatley and our new team member, Colin Fredericks, an accountant whose specialty was tracking hidden assets. He's already moved money, Colin reported, showing me the activity on accounts I'd never known existed until 2 weeks ago. $5 million transferred to a new holding company yesterday. Can he do that? I asked. Margaret and Colin exchanged looks. Legally, it's complicated, Margaret said. But there's something he doesn't know. What's that? You beat him to it. Colin turned his laptop toward me. The commercial property you purchased in Saratoga? The one with the environmental issues that tanked its value? I nodded. The environmental report was falsified by the previous owner. The property is clean, and it happens to sit on the proposed route for the new tech corridor development. Margaret smiled thinly. Its value just tripled, and that's just the beginning. For the first time since Richard had dismissed our anniversary, I felt something like joy ripple through my veins. Show me what's next, I said. 3 days later, Richard appeared at my attorney's office unannounced, demanding a meeting. I watched through one-way glass as the man who had been my husband for 40 years paced like a caged animal. He's threatening to fight the house sale, my attorney, Judith Walsh, reported. Says you acted without his knowledge or consent. And? I asked. And nothing. The sale was legal. Your name is on the deed. You had power of attorney, and you split the proceeds equitably. Judith's smile was razor-sharp. He's blustering. He'll try to paint me as mentally unstable, I predicted. Say I'm having some kind of breakdown. Let him try, Judith replied. Your financial records show more stability and sound judgment than is due right now. 2 weeks later, Richard's attorney proposed a settlement. I would receive 30% of our marital assets in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. Judith relayed the offer with barely concealed disdain. He's hoping you don't know about the offshore accounts or the real estate holdings in Colorado. What do you recommend? I asked. Counter with a forensic audit of all accounts from the past 15 years, Judith said. That should make him reconsider. It did. Richard's next offer jumped to 40%, then 45%. I declined them all. I don't think you understand, I told Judith. I don't want a settlement. You want to go to court? Judith looked surprised. No, I said. I want everything. The first domino in Richard's financial empire fell 3 months after I left. A real estate development in Austin that Richard had heavily leveraged lost its primary investor overnight. The press release cited concerns about management stability. What the press release didn't mention was that the primary investor had recently joined a women's entrepreneurial group in Portsmouth, a group I had founded with seed money from my Saratoga property profit. It wasn't personal, the investor, Teresa Mendoza, told Richard in a terse phone call. Just business. The second domino fell when 3 key executives left Richard's firm simultaneously to join a new investment group. The group's silent partner remained anonymous, but its public face was Margaret Wheatley. Richard's frantic voicemail reached me through Judith. Whatever game you're playing, it won't work, he hissed. You think you can hurt me financially? I made you Dorleen. You were nothing before me.
I didn't respond.
I was too busy reviewing proposals for my newest acquisition, a struggling tech startup with a revolutionary battery design. The founder, a brilliant engineer named Sophia Chin, had been seeking funding for 2 years. Male-dominated venture capital firms had repeatedly passed. They can't see past my gender to the technology, Sophia explained during our first meeting. One actually suggested I hire a male CEO as a figurehead. I studied the prototype diagrams. What do you need to bring this to market? 8 million and 18 months, Sophia answered without hesitation. You'll have 10 million and complete creative control, I countered. In exchange for 60% ownership. Sophia's eyes widened. You're not going to replace me? Quite the opposite, I said. I'm betting on you. The battery company, rebranded as Artemis Power, announced its first major contract 6 months later. The client was a defense contractor previously loyal to Richard's investment portfolio. I watched from the audience as Sophia presented the technology at the signing ceremony. That evening, a text came from an unknown number. This has your fingerprints all over it. Stop now before you regret it. I showed the message to Judith, who immediately contacted our security consultant. He's getting desperate, Judith observed. That's good news for us, bad news for his judgment. The security consultant, a former FBI agent named Diana Roberts, increased surveillance on my apartment and implemented stricter protocols for my travel. He's not violent, I protested. Men like your husband don't react well to losing control, Diana replied. Let's not take chances. As Artemis Power's stock climbed, Richard's investment firm announced its first-ever quarterly loss. Financial blogs speculated about leadership instability. 2 major clients withdrew their portfolios. In Portsmouth, I expanded my network. My waterfront apartment became a weekly gathering place for women entrepreneurs, financial experts, and business leaders, many of whom had stories about Richard Parker and men like him. He blackballed me from 3 investment rounds after I questioned his projections, said a fintech CEO. He told my biggest client I was emotionally unreliable after I turned down his dinner invitation, added a commercial real estate broker. Each story added another piece to my emerging strategy. Not just revenge, justice. 8 months after leaving, my net worth had quadrupled. Richard's had dropped by 30%. His legal team had gone from demanding to pleading, offering increasingly generous settlement terms. Through it all, I maintained my silence, communicating only through Judith. My focus remained on building, not destroying, though if Richard's empire crumbled as I constructed mine, I wouldn't mourn its fall. The closest call came during a finance conference in Boston. I had just finished a private meeting with potential investors when I spotted Richard in the hotel lobby. He hadn't seen me yet, engaged in intense conversation with a man I recognized as the CEO of a struggling airline Richard had been trying to acquire. I stepped behind a decorative column, pulling out my phone to text Diana. A familiar voice froze me in place. Hiding from someone? I turned to find Thomas Winters, Richard's closest friend and business associate for 30 years, watching me with undisguised curiosity. Hello, Thomas, I said calmly. Richard is beside himself, you know, Thomas said. Whatever point you're trying to make. I'm not making a point, I interrupted. I'm making a life. Thomas studied me. He always said you were smarter than you let on. I didn't believe him until now. Most men don't see what they're not looking for. He'll figure it out eventually, Thomas warned. Your involvement with Artemis. The Austin development. It's only a matter of time. I met his gaze steadily. And when he does? Thomas sighed. That's what worries me. Richard doesn't lose well. I've noticed. Thomas glanced toward the lobby where Richard was still talking. You should know, he's not well. Physically, I mean, his doctor is concerned about his heart. A younger version of myself might have felt guilt or worry. This version simply nodded. Thank you for telling me. Will it change anything? Thomas asked.
No.
As I slipped away toward the service elevator, I realized I meant it. Richard's health was his concern now, not mine. The balance sheet between us couldn't be settled with sympathy. That night, I made my boldest move yet, a hostile takeover bid for the airline Richard had been pursuing. By morning, I owned controlling interest in the company that had been Richard's obsession for the past year. It wasn't personal, I told myself as I signed the final documents. It was just business. The press called it the Parker dissolution, the rapid, systematic dismantling of Richard Parker's once unassailable financial empire. Over 6 devastating months, he lost controlling interest in his flagship investment firm, watched his private equity fund collapse amid rumors of accounting irregularities, and faced mounting legal troubles as anxious partners turned state's evidence. What the press didn't report was the architect behind it all, me. The wife Richard had discarded after 40 years as not worth celebrating. On a snowy February morning, Richard requested a meeting through proper channels, through Judith, not by ambushing my office again. I agreed, specifying neutral territory, a private room at the Boston Public Library. He arrived first, standing when I entered, his once commanding presence diminished. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, the words stiff on his tongue. "I appreciate your time." I nodded, taking the seat opposite him. "What can I do for you, Richard?" He cleared his throat. "The SEC investigation? I'm told you could influence it." Could I? I kept my expression neutral. "Please." The words seemed to cost him physically. "They're talking about criminal charges. At my age. You die in prison." I finished for him. "Yes, I imagine you would." Richard's eyes flashed with momentary anger before dimming to resignation. "Is that what you want?" "What I wanted," I said carefully, "was 40 years of partnership.
What I wanted was respect.
What I wanted was not to be called a burden on the anniversary of the day I promised my life to you." He flinched. "I was wrong. About all of it. I see that now." Convenient timing. "Deserved criticism," he acknowledged. "But Dorleen, whatever you think of me, and God knows I've earned your contempt, there are innocent people who will be hurt if my companies collapse entirely. Employees. Clients with retirement funds." I allowed a small smile. "You think I haven't protected them? The pension fund was separated from your operations 3 months ago. The employee ownership plan now controls the profitable divisions. Even your administrative assistant has a guaranteed position at 40th Ruby." Richard stared at me, comprehension dawning. "You planned for everything. Unlike you," I said. I never underestimated my opponent. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Outside the library's frosted windows, Boston traffic moved through gentle snowfall. "What happens now?" Richard finally asked. I handed him a folder. "My final offer. You relinquish all claims against me and my company. You admit to the SEC violations outlined on page 3, the lesser ones that will result in fines but not prison time. You retire immediately and permanently from all business interests. And in exchange, you keep the Manhattan apartment and your personal accounts. Enough to live comfortably, if not extravagantly. And the SEC investigation focuses on corporate liability, not personal criminal charges." Richard opened the folder with unsteady hands, scanning the documents inside. "This is generous."
No, y correcta.
"It's merciful. There's a difference." He looked up, meeting my eyes.
Why?
"Because 40 years means something to me, even if it didn't to you." Richard nodded slowly, reaching for the pen I offered. He signed each document without further comment, then slid the folder back across the table. "Is this where you tell me you've forgiven me?" he asked. I considered him, this man who had been the center of my world for 4 decades. "No," I said finally. This is where I tell you goodbye. I gathered the signed documents and stood. One more thing, Richard said as I reached the door. All of this, what you've built, it's extraordinary. I wish I'd seen what you were capable of sooner. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. No, I said without turning. You wish you'd seen me sooner. I left him sitting alone in the elegant room, surrounded by leather-bound books and his own regrets. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Boston in a fresh, clean blanket of white. I lifted my face to the sky, feeling each cool flake as a benediction. To my surprise, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only release. The balance sheet between us was finally, irrevocably settled. 1 year to the day after Richard signed the settlement papers, I hosted a gala for the 40th Ruby Foundation in the Grand Ballroom of the Portsmouth Historical Society. The foundation, dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs over 50, had already funded 27 startups and provided mentorship to hundreds more. At 66, I had become what financial publications called a force of reinvention in private equity. My company now managed assets exceeding $2 billion, with specialized divisions in sustainable technology, healthcare innovation, and commercial real estate. I wore ruby red that evening, a sleek, modern gown that highlighted my silver hair and the confident set of my shoulders. As I circulated among guests, accepting congratulations and discussing future initiatives, my assistant approached with a discreet message. "He's here," the young woman murmured. "In the garden courtyard." I nodded, unsurprised. Part of me had been expecting this. I handed my champagne flute to my assistant. "Give me 10 minutes, then have Diana find me." The garden courtyard was lit with delicate string lights that reflected off the light dusting of spring snow. Richard stood near the stone fountain, his silhouette thinner than I remembered. He turned at the sound of my footsteps. "You look well," he said, his voice carrying notes of genuine admiration. "Thank you," I replied. The invitation was for the foundation donors only. Richard nodded, his smile rueful. "I made a substantial anonymous donation last month. Your vetting process needs work." Despite myself, I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. Some things never changed. "Congratulations on your success," he continued. "The foundation is doing remarkable work." "Why are you here, Richard?" I asked, cutting through the pleasantries. He sighed, his breath visible in the cool evening air. "Closure, perhaps. Or atonement. I'm not entirely sure myself." I studied him, noting the expensive but subdued suit, the absence of his usual gold cufflinks and power tie. He looked humbled. "I'm selling the Manhattan apartment," he said abruptly. "Moving to Arizona. The doctors think the climate will be better for my heart." "I see," I said. "I wish you well." "Do you?" Richard asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I finally said. Not out of lingering affection, but because hatred requires too much energy to maintain. I have better uses for my resources now. Richard nodded, accepting this. "I've had a lot of time to think this past year. About what I lost. Not the money or the business, though I'd be lying if I said I don't miss it. But the chance to grow old with someone who knew me when I was young." "You didn't lose that chance, Richard. You discarded it." "Yes," he agreed simply. "I did." We stood in silence, separated by 2 feet of physical space and an unbridgeable emotional chasm. "I've drafted a new will," Richard said finally. "Everything goes to your foundation. It's not much anymore, but it's something." I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat. "That's generous." "It's inadequate," he corrected, "but it's all I have left to give." From inside the ballroom, the sound of applause filtered through the winter air. My keynote speech would be starting soon. "I should go," I said. Richard nodded. "There's one more thing. A question I've wanted to ask since you first left." He hesitated, then pushed forward. "When did you know you could do this? Build all this?" I considered the question, my mind traveling back through decades. "I always knew," I answered finally. But somewhere along the way, I forgot. Until you reminded me. When I called you a burden, Richard supplied, his voice hollow. When you made me realize I had nothing left to lose, I corrected. Freedom is a powerful motivator, Richard. He nodded, acceptance in his eyes. I won't intrude on your life again. No, I agreed. You won't. I turned to leave, then paused. Take care of your health, Richard. Because you still care? He asked, a trace of his old arrogance surfacing. I smiled, genuinely this time, because I want you to live long enough to see everything I build next. I left him standing alone in the garden, returning to the warmth and light of the ballroom where my new life awaited. Inside, Margaret caught my eye with a questioning look. I gave a small nod. Everything was fine. Better than fine. As I took the podium to thunderous applause, I surveyed the room filled with women whose lives and businesses were flourishing because of my foundation. This was my legacy now, not the 40 years spent in Richard's shadow, but what I had created in the aftermath. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began. 1 year ago, we set out to prove that it's never too late to rewrite your story. On the morning of my 67th birthday, I woke before dawn in my penthouse overlooking Portsmouth Harbor. I wrapped myself in a cashmere robe, a gift from Sophia Chin, whose Artemis power batteries now powered electric vehicles across 3 continents, and made my way to the kitchen where I brewed coffee in quiet solitude. The past 18 months had transformed 40th Ruby Holdings from a revenge vehicle into a legitimate financial powerhouse. With offices in Boston, New York, and San Francisco, the company now employed over 200 people, 60% of them women over 50. The Wall Street Journal had recently named me among the 50 most influential figures in American finance, a designation that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. The profile had noted my unorthodox path to success, without dwelling on Richard or our marriage, focusing instead on my innovative investment approaches and commitment to funding overlooked entrepreneurs. As morning light spilled across my kitchen countertops, my phone chimed with birthday messages. The first was from my new executive team, a video montage of congratulations. The second was from Judith, now a close friend, as well as my attorney. The third was from a number I didn't recognize. May your day be as exceptional as your accomplishments. T.W. Thomas Winters. I hadn't heard from him since that pivotal phone call that had ended his bid for Artemis Power. After a moment's hesitation, I typed a simple reply. Thank you, Thomas. His response came almost immediately. Richard moved to Scottsdale last week. His doctors give him 2 years, maybe 3. I thought you should know. I set the phone down, my coffee cooling forgotten as emotions I couldn't name washed through me. Not grief, exactly. Not satisfaction. Something more complex, the recognition of an era truly ending. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Diana stood outside, impeccably dressed as always. Happy birthday, she said, handing me a small, elegantly wrapped package. From all of us. Inside was a business card holder in polished ruby red stone. Engraved on it was a single word, founder. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely touched. There's more, Diana said, producing a folder from her briefcase. The board approved your proposal. The women's business incubator breaks ground next month. $20 million in initial funding, with commitments for $30 million more. I smiled. The incubator had been my dream for months, a space where women entrepreneurs could access resources, mentorship, and community support. Its first programs would focus specifically on women over 50 starting second careers after marriages, caregiving responsibilities, or corporate burnout. And this, Diana added, pulling out a newspaper. Today's Times. The headline made me catch my breath. Parker Financial under federal investigation. Founder faces potential charges. Richard's old company, I murmured, scanning the article. The investigation centered on practices predating Richard's departure, practices I had carefully documented before leaving. Should we issue a statement? Diana asked. I shook my head.
No.
That chapter is closed. Later that day, as I prepared for my birthday dinner with my executive team, my phone alerted me to another text. This one was from Sophia Chen. Turn on CNBC now. I found the remote and switched on my rarely used television. Richard's former company was the top story, stock in freefall, board members resigning, clients withdrawing billions. The empire Richard had built over 40 years was collapsing completely, not because of my actions now, but because of his own decisions years ago. The seeds of his destruction had been planted long before I left. I had merely stopped protecting him from their consequences. I switched off the television, feeling strangely hollow. The revenge I had once craved now tasted like ash. This wasn't about Richard anymore. It hadn't been for months. I had outgrown my need for vengeance, replacing it with something far more powerful: purpose. My new assistant, a former corporate lawyer who had left her firm after facing age discrimination, called to confirm dinner reservations. The private room at Harbiside is ready. Everyone will be there at 7. Thank you, Eleanor, I replied. Please add one more to the list. Of course. May I ask who? I smiled. A potential new member for our mentorship program. She's 63, recently divorced, and trying to restart her career in finance after 30 years as a corporate wife. I met her at last month's foundation event. I'll update the reservation, Eleanor said. After hanging up, I moved to my dressing room to prepare for the evening. The woman I saw in the mirror, confident, purposeful, unburdened, bore little resemblance to the compliant wife who had cooked an anniversary dinner for an ungrateful husband 2 years earlier. That night, surrounded by the team I had built and the future I was creating, I raised a glass of champagne. To new beginnings, I proposed. And balanced books, Margaret added with a knowing smile. As laughter and conversation flowed around me, I felt a sense of completion. The ledger of my past had been settled, not with Richard's destruction, but with my own rebirth. The real revenge wasn't taking away what Richard valued. It was discovering what I valued and building a life around it. 3 days later, a final letter arrived from Richard's attorney. Inside was a handwritten note along with legal documents transferring the last of his personal assets to my foundation. I finally understand what you were worth celebrating. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Then I picked up the phone to call my team. We had work to do. The news of Richard Parker's death reached me on a warm July morning 18 months later. Heart failure, peaceful, in his sleep. The obituary listed his considerable early achievements and noted he was survived by his former wife of 40 years. I attended the small service in Arizona. I sat in the back row, acknowledged the few mourners who recognized me with quiet dignity, and left before the reception. On my return flight to Boston, I drafted plans for the Richard Parker Memorial Scholarship, a fund specifically for the children of single mothers seeking education in financial management. It was neither forgiveness nor a final twist of the knife, but something else entirely: transformation. The pain he had caused, converted into opportunity for others. The ultimate alchemy. 5 years to the day after Richard had dismissed our Ruby anniversary as nothing worth celebrating, I stood at the ribbon cutting for the 40th Ruby Center for Women's Financial Empowerment. Television cameras captured the moment as I addressed the crowd. They say the best revenge is living well, I began, my voice strong and clear. But I've learned that true power comes not from vengeance, but from creation. Not from settling scores, but from opening doors. I surveyed the faces before me. Women of all ages who had found hope and opportunity through my foundation, employees who had helped build my vision, entrepreneurs who had flourished with my support. We all face moments of reckoning in our lives. I continued. Moments when we must decide whether to accept what we're given or demand what we deserve. My moment came after 40 years of marriage, when I was told I was nothing worth celebrating. A ripple of reaction moved through the crowd. Today, I stand before you as living proof that it is never too late to begin again. Never too late to recognize your own worth. Never too late to balance the books of your life. As applause thundered around me, I cut the ruby red ribbon, opening the doors to the center that would become my lasting legacy, not a monument to revenge, but a testament to resilience. Not a reminder of what had been lost, but a celebration of what could still be found. The balance sheet was complete. If this story of strength, resilience, and empowerment resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more powerful stories that celebrate women reclaiming their lives and building extraordinary second acts. Hit that subscribe button now to join our community of viewers who believe it's never too late to rewrite your story. New videos every week that speak directly to the experiences of women who refuse to be defined by others' limitations.